Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this edition of Leak Project. I am your host, Rex Bear, and we have returning guest Gerald R. Clark with us today. This guy just has a gourmet buffet of knowledge on the genealogy of the gods, the Anunnaki, the Sumerian tablets. He put together The Seventh Planet, Mercury Rising, just an incredible book. And then also The Anunnaki of Nibiru, another fantastic book. Now, tonight we're going to discuss something that Gerald put together a short while ago called Nibiru Status Update. So we're going to be able to look at a lot of dates and figures on that. And Gerald, really appreciate you joining us tonight here at the Leak Project. How you doing?
Really good, Rex. It's good to be back after such short notice. I guess we got more to say.
Yeah, absolutely. I knew that I had to get you back on the show right away because, I mean, we didn't have a 4-hour opportunity last time. And even with the 2 hours that we did have, I would say that the amount of information that you compiled in that time frame is like an entire 24-hour session somewhere else. So, I mean, you definitely know your stuff. No pauses, no ums or ahs. I mean, just right to it. So,
Does that mean we don't get a bathroom break today?
We can work something out. We can work.
Okay.
We can work something out. So not a problem. Now, here's the cool thing about what you've had the opportunity to do with your life is, I mean, you've worked with companies like Lockheed Martin. You've done a lot of really high-tech stuff. You've traveled the world. You've seen some great locations that most people have only seen on the internet. But let's jump into this Nibiru status update that you put together. Why did you decide to write this in the first place?
Well, I was doing some focused radio shows with another station last year on my second book. And the second book was more focused, like I said, on, well, if the Anunnaki created us, then who created the Anunnaki? And then took one of the real high-ranking members of their council and walked through a perspective on that book. So in that process, I think we brought up the Enuma Elish account as well, and this was the Babylonian epic of creation that described their cosmogony, how our solar system came to be, and it was essentially told as an allegorical battle of these planets that had the potential to run each other and what they had to do about it. One of them talks about masking the radiation. So anyway, Nibiru came up again, and I'd written my first book, The Anunnaki of Nibiru, and I had kind of utilized some of the thinking to arrive at a past crossing date of Nibiru, because if it was true that it came every 3,600 years, if you could figure out what a crossing date was, you could figure out when it's due next, right? Not that you're going to live your life in fear and go, oh my God, this thing, let's go watch Melancholia every night.
Right.
But just from a data standpoint to understand, what the cycle of things are. And so I had picked a date based on some writings that I had read that indicated a visit by one of their premier council members, the actual top one who was the king on Nibiru, Anu, had come to the earth and was at the city of Uruk, the city of Gilgamesh, by the way, and supposedly on a step pyramid at one of the ziggurat temples there, and was observing the sky, and we took that to mean he was looking at his home planet, and I may have gotten that confused or didn't go deep into it enough. So I accepted the date of that, which was approximately 4000 BC. I actually believed it was 3760 because that's when they commissioned the Nippurian calendar that's used even to this day by the Jewish community. So that came from the Sumerians. Anyway, so I had this date in my first book, and all of a sudden everybody's coming on YouTube showing pictures of a second sun and all these hypotheses about where Nibiru is. If it truly existed, where is it now? So I got asked actually to sit down and write a report so that we could do a special presentation just on this topic. So I've done this in the past. I wrote this thing April 28th of 2015. And there were some pretty significant sightings on YouTube by that time that I think 9 out of 10 of them could have been lens flares or explainable, but
Right.
There was at least 1 or 2 that kept showing up intermittently, that depending on where you were on the Earth, whether you're at the Neumayer station in the South Pole or just wherever, they were getting some pretty interesting shots, and they were unexplainable, especially if you went on Stellarium, identified where the sun and the moon and where they were on the horizon, what direction from the Earth. you could basically say, well, what did we see at that time? You know, anybody can do that. So, you know, if something was there that was unexplainable, it left a bit of a mystery. Well, this started happening a lot since about 2014. I think you're well aware of that, given all the traffic on your channel about Nibiru or Planet X, right?
Sure. I mean, it's been
Yeah.
going on since 2003. I mean, they've been crying wolf back. I mean, I think that's really what's kind of steered a lot of people away from even the possibility, is because it's been going on for so long now. A lot of people have just kind of created that build up, you know, hey, quit telling me that because I've heard it before.
Well, it's the crying, you know, the sky's falling syndrome, where you say it one too many times and it doesn't fall, then everybody just thinks you're a kook, right?
Right.
Well, I'm going to give a little context for that. This is not something new. This actually goes back to about 1790, and I have a whole bunch of articles in this document that link to all the different scientific inquisitions into this exact topic. This is not some new phenomenon that you know, only the conspiracy theorists are into. It actually is real science, and it has a good basis in history that is not changed today. They're still working to the same assumptions. So with that said, I actually decided to go reanalyze my date, look at some other evidence. This was back in April last year, and see if what we were seeing in the sky could have any corroboration with what the Sumerians told us about their home planet. And, you know, speaking of that, I think we discussed last time that it looks like Nibiru is part of a constellation. It was described that way in the Enuma Elish, and we're gonna cover that as well. And so there's more than one object here. It looks like possibly a brown dwarf or a second sun that never ignited is the center of their constellation. And then Nibiru is just one of the satellites, if you will, in orbit around that. And each satellite may have satellites as well. Even in the Enuma Elish, where it described one of the satellites of Nibiru striking a planet that was called Tiamat in their account, which turns out to be where the Earth was and became the Earth, with pieces of it being broken off into the asteroid belt and such. So it's a very detailed account, this Enuma Elish. And when you read this and you go, wow, could this really have happened? It's very scientific if you can approach it from the standpoint of what we know now. So with that said, I decided to look at some different approaches to getting, number one, is Nibiru real? Number two, if it was real, was it correlated with flood accounts that we have on the planet, which seem to be a lot of them? Because one of the key floods that people seem to correlate the Nibiru passage with is that of the flood of Noah, right? So we didn't get to talk about that one on the first show. I usually include the story of the primitive worker enslavement program after 600 years and then move it forward to what happened through that account, that terrible, terrible account, ending up with a flood and the saving of just one family and a few workers from that clan of Enkis. Well, I didn't talk about that because we went off to the city of Ur and described how significant the origins of the patriarch Abram were, and his affiliation with Enlil himself, through his father Terah, and directly as his general. By the way, everybody thinks about this guy as a religious guy. He was a military general. Anyway, so with that said, I wanted to go just real quickly through the approaches that I took to A, say, is Nibiru real? B, if it was real, when did it last pass? So that we could determine when it's coming next. That's what everybody wants to know. And then the third thing is I want to say right up front that I am not a fearmonger, and I'm not doing this to cause fear, to lead anybody to do anything other than reckon within themselves how they would deal with this kind of information. I don't care what level of extinction level event comes in. It basically forces you to assess what you would do in response to it. And I cover that in the conclusion part, which I thought was really the part of the conversation that wasn't being brought out because everybody was being manipulated based on their fear of an extinction level event. Okay? So the first approach I did was start with the Sumerian kings list. The reason I did that is because they mention at the end of the first 8 rulers or so, which is shown in table 1 here, which totals 240,400 years. Okay, remember we said they came here 450,000 years ago? Well, if you believe the Sumerian kings list, just the first part before the flood, they ruled for 240,400 years here. Okay, and you can see Abaro Tutu at 18,600 years of his reign. He was the father of Gilgamesh, one of the notorious kings of the city of Uruk, who gets claimed to be Nimrod and several other famous names in the Bible. Okay, but that was Gilgamesh. Okay, So here we have a end date of 240,400 years. If you knew when they came, Sitchin said they came approximately 450,000 years ago. One of Enki's anonymous messages that I hope everybody listens to on my website, which is shown where my mouse is moving right here. He says he came 100 SARs ago, and a SAR being 3,600 years means 360,000 years ago. So you could subtract this 240,000 from that and go, is that when Noah's flood was? So this is kind of the attempt I took. And what I found from my analysis, doing the kings before the flood and after, that was a much longer period ago. That was 119,600 years ago. And we believe Noah's flood happened right at the end of the last ice age, which was about 12,000 years ago. So clearly the one that was mentioned in the Sumerian king list does not look like the Nibiru passage at Noah's flood. Now that's an assumption in itself, is that the flood of Noah was caused by the passage of Nibiru. And there's a lot of strong evidence to indicate that was the case. Okay, so I did another table outside of this document to look at when the biblical Exodus happened, and also a couple other events. And I tied down another date that seemed to corroborate what this report shows. And we'll hopefully have some time at the end to do that one, okay? So going to after the flood, the Sumerian kings list picks up again. None of the reigns are divisible by a SAR, or 3,600 years. They're much shorter than the reigns in this top table, as you can see. These are all divisible by 3,600. Comes out to equal rule, years of their planet going around our sun, which was a SAR. Okay, so something happened after the flood in terms of management on the Mesopotamian plain, with all these merry-go-round of Sumerian kings, as you can see here. Even though some of them had very long reigns, these reigns are coincident with the ages of the table in Genesis from Adam to Noah, except this top one, Jushur, right here, is 1,200 years. That's longer than any of them in Adam to Noah, which was held by, the top age was held by Methuselah, and I think he was 969 years old. So it looks like there was some diffusing or mixing of DNA that took their very, very long lifespans and turned them into demigods with much shorter lifespans. That's what this looks like to me. Yeah.
Now, let me ask you real quick.
Still don't have...
Oh,
go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just going to say, as far as all this data that you've got here, I mean, was all of this translated from the Sumerian tablets?
No, this original Sumerian Kings list, I have a story behind that. I won't tell it here, but I went to Washington, D.C., visited the Library of Congress, and requested the documents that Berossus originally did for the archives there, and this list is part of that. Okay, so this original Kings list came from Berossus in about 330 B.C., where he wrote this down for other cultures to be able to understand the Sumerian culture.
Great. And you actually went to D.C. and was able to get this. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I have it in my possession. That was one of the turning points in my research, when it kind of turned from research into, oh my goodness, this could possibly be real. So anyway, the long story short is I used the Sumerian kings dating and their rulerships to try to back up to find out if that passage was in Nibiru. I don't think it was. Okay, that doesn't mean to say some of these other major and minor floods described by the Egyptians weren't caused by Nibiru, but I couldn't find a document to definitively say that was the case. So I decided to go a couple of different other ways. Okay, you with me?
Yeah, I'm with you.
So, so just to get it in your head, if Nibiru was going to come like this year or last year, that crossing point in history would have been 1585 to 1587 BCE. Okay, well, that turns out to be the biblical Exodus. Well, a lot of people looked at that and thought the plagues of Egypt were probably caused by the passage of Nibiru.
Okay.
The red iron oxide from the planet, turning the water red, and all the other plagues that came, the earthquakes and all of the volcanoes going off. Well, that's kind of what we're seeing now, right?
Right.
So, yeah. So we talked a little bit about the Enuma Elish. The key point here that we're trying to get to is this intruder planet possibly real? Is it going to come every 3,600 years? And in some of the old documents, they call it the planet of crossing. In the old Babylonian version of the Enuma Elish, it was renamed to be Marduk. We have older documents to indicate it was called Nibiru, the Anunnaki home planet. But so this being, who was the chief deity of Babylon, renamed their planet in the Enuma Elish, which was read every spring in Babylon, by the way, to all the people, right? and later he included the 50 names of Marduk when he actually ascended to the Lord of the Earth command on the Anunnaki Council with a rank of 50. So that number 50, that's why that's important to them, in case you see that. Anyway, so I looked at the Enuma Elish account and realized that, it was pretty clear that this was the basis of a lot of the belief in the fact that there was a intruder planet that was caught into our solar system that travels at a retrograde orbit and basically has collisions because of that fact. I mean, if it's going the opposite direction to the other planets, there's a possibility it could collide with things, right? Even if it's going the same direction, if it's traveling much faster, it could approach and collide with it from behind, which appears to be what happened with one of the moons or the satellites of Nibiru when it struck Tiamat, creating planet Earth and subsequently capturing one of its moons as our moon, and that's the one they called Kingu. So moving forward, past the Enuma Elish, we basically know that some of the scientists in the astronomical community were aware of the Enuma Elish, in particular Dr. Harrington, which we're going to cover in detail, but they were aware of this intruder planet concept, and we're trying to use this as the justification for whatever force was tilting the plane of Neptune and Uranus. And this is the same thing that scientists had been looking for in the astronomical community since, like I said, about 1790. They knew something out there was large enough to cause Neptune and Uranus to get disturbed. And it had to be bigger than Neptune and Uranus to do that. So you with me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So moving forward, in 1976, this researcher, Zecharia Sitchin, introduced a book, The 12th Planet, which was a reference to the fact that he believed, based on the Sumerian writings, that there were more than 9 planets in our solar system. And the Sumerian account, they count the sun and the moon as 2 of the planets, okay? So that gets you to 11, but he believed there were 12. And this 12th one was the home planet of the Anunnaki that he described, okay? So he was very well aware of the Enuma Elish, and he later had a discussion with some of the astronomical community on video about this invader planet concept that he read about in the Sumerian documents and then conveyed in his books, okay? So I recommend the 12th planet to everyone. And it turns out that the 12th planet was the Anunnaki's home planet, and they counted their planets from the outside in. So they were the last one in, so it would make sense that they would be the 12th one, according to their way of thinking. And the Earth, again, as I noted, would be the 7th planet, and that has a lot to do with why I named my second book, The 7th Planet, Mercury Rising. Okay. So let's go down to figure 1 here, VA 243, the Berlin Museum. There's the Honorable Zecharia Sitchin, who it's almost become fashionable to bash, to break another person's cup to make yourself seem more credible. Well, that's how you know you've got a real hero, is somebody that everybody's standing on their shoulders but trying to kick him in the head to push him down while they get on top, right?
That's a good point.
I hate that kind of behavior. But anyway, here he is holding up the seal. He was so proud of this picture. And you can see where my mouse cursor is pointing right here on the upper left-hand corner. There's some, I don't know, pointed star-looking thing with some little spherical dots that are raised up surrounding it, and they're different sizes in different locations. So according to his writing in The 12th Planet, he believed that in this cylinder seal, and that these orbs represented our solar system, and this was a commemorative seal showing one of the Anunnaki gods seated here holding the plow, commissioning it to one of the primitive workers who's now going to be their farmer and grow their food. And I actually did some decoding on some of the symbols on here, and I've got them put away somewhere, but I'll share them at some other time. But anyway, this was a critical piece of evidence to Zecharia Sitchin about the Anunnaki home planet. If you look also, there's some other little dot right over here that no one really quite knows what it is, or it's this one here by its head. So that one is even more mysterious. But anyway, so there have been people that look at this and go, no, based on this, it's not a star, those aren't planets, it's not a sun, and, you know, just tear the seal to pieces. I mean, just looking at it from an intuitive standpoint, one would look at this and go, that's clearly a inner sun, a central sun with some spheres going around it, okay, without even being stupid. I
well,
mean,
you
that's
can
what
see
it
the
looks like,
star.
right?
I mean, there's a star drawn on the outside of
Right,
it.
right, right. Right. So, and I wrote some names in this report. I'll just do a disclaimer right now that I named some of the people who basically tried to deposition this researcher and discredit all his information by the misinterpretation of this very seal. So it's very controversial for that reason. And that's one of the reasons I decided to go there and bring this up and do a kind of a new look at it. So without further ado, here's another picture of the seal without it tilted to the side. You can see more clearly here. Here's one of the little dots I showed you that has never really been understood what that is. So anyway, the question that comes to mind is, well, if this is our solar system, how could you prove such a thing? Okay. And the key point about it is, if there's correlation with our solar system, what about this other dot that clearly indicates that they believe their planet was part of our solar system now, as depicted in the Enuma Elish? Okay. So somebody did some research, and I gave the link back to it just prior to Figure 2, that basically took a digital shot of these spheres surrounding this central sun, or whatever it is, and then doing a pixel analysis on them to see if they correlated with the diameters of the planets in our solar system that we know. And I have to tell you, I actually used the size of the sphere of Nibiru. I couldn't remember how I came up with this in order to get its diameter for comparison, but somehow I did, and it came out with a factor or an error that was close to the other one, so I kept it, okay? But we don't truly know the exact diameter of Nibiru, okay? I just want to put that out right now. So anyway, if you take these spheres, put a number on them, put them in a table, measure the number of pixels from side to side along its diameter, you can then come up with some sort of scalar. I'm going to go down where it's easier to see here. I'm in Figure 6 right now. You can see that with the measured diameter, which is the parameter d, you get these in kilometers, okay? The sun being over 1 million kilometers in diameter, and our Earth being 12,756 kilometers in diameter, okay? Well, the next thing we did is we took the pixel data over at about the first, second, third, fourth, fifth column, which is parameter p, measured the pixels, and then looked to see if there was any correlation between those sizes of those spheres on VA243 with the ones of the known measured values, okay? And if you do it without using any kind of scalars, and you do it logarithmically, or just doing a percent correlation, no logarithms, you come out with 89.98% correlation, which is pretty good. It's not bad, but it's not definitive for a scientific, that these, or it could have been a sloppy artist, right? But there's wiggle room there. And you have to realize these cylinder seals are very precise. When you look at the technology that goes into making a cylinder out of crystal and then rolling it out in reverse image and reverse perspective onto a piece of clay, that's really unbelievable, okay? So I'm back with you here. I had a little bit of a spill, sorry. It makes life real, right? Anyway, so what I thought was, you know what, these guys use a number system that wasn't the same as ours. They used a base 60 number system, which we call sexagesimal. So I thought, well, somehow, in order to display these planets that are very different in size, you can see that, how would you get them correlated onto a small area on a cylinder seal like that and still be able to see Pluto when the sun is so big, right? Pluto being the smallest one, the sun being so big.
Right.
This is a real hard scaling problem, right? Think about it. So with that said, I decided to play with logarithms because I knew a linear scale couldn't possibly create a mapping, a transform from one data set to the other. So I played around, and I thought, and it just occurred to me to try a logarithmic set that uses the sexagesimal system, which I did. Well, when I did that, and you can see that in column 3 and then column 6, I took the log percent difference of those and then charted that, and it comes out to 99.503%. Unbelievable. So what I'm telling you, the result of this data is, without losing your listeners, is that the data and the images on VA243 exactly correlate to our planet sizes, just as Zecharia Sitchin said, including the sun.
Yeah, that's
so, the fact that he was made to be a liar over this really upset me. So this is part of the reason I went and looked at this to see, okay, so what are we trying to do? We're trying to establish the validity that Nibiru is real before we go find where it could potentially be located, right?
Makes
Are you with
sense.
me?
Absolutely.
Okay, sorry I was moving around a little bit here.
No problem, man.
Yeah. So anyway, so that was very conclusive to me, and I don't know that that's ever been refuted. So I'd like to hear it from anybody about that, because it is a very, very significant piece of the puzzle.
I mean, that's
Okay,
spot on.
so
even 90% is
Yeah,
phenomenal.
yeah. Well, now you realize that these guys were clever. They had technology. They used mathematics. They understood about scales and dimensions and all kinds of drafting tricks that we just assumed that we knew. Well, they knew it too. So, okay. So from there, we kind of have established that the Sumerian records, and especially the cylinder seals, are quite accurate. So keep that in mind as we go forward. All right. Okay, so here were my conclusions from that. And this document is available on Amazon and on my website for people that want it. I was going to try and make it available for free pretty soon, because I think the data is going to be outdated pretty soon, at least by the end of this year. Okay, so let's go on a little bit farther in time. Let's go from 1976, when when Sitchin wrote his book, to the time that he actually met with Dr. Harrington in Washington, D.C. at the United States Naval Observatory. Okay, so we have a video of this, and I have a link to that, which is very, very telling. Okay, we're talking about the head of the United States Naval Observatory, who, by the way, had read Sitchin's book between 1976, when he wrote it, and when he actually commissioned Voyager 1, Voyager 2, Pioneer 10, and 11. Okay, these probes looking for stuff out in our solar system. So in 1990, they got together. Harrington and he were basically there to exchange data about what their theories were for this intruding planet and what its effects could have been on Neptune, Uranus, and possibly the inner solar system, which they didn't go into very much. Okay, but in the interview, when you watch it, Harrington, here he is right here. This is a screen shot off of that, August 30th, 1990. I think I said December on your radio show yesterday. I'm sorry.
Oh, close.
Okay, and that's in Figure 7. Yeah. Well, he pulls out an orbital chart. This one's been augmented with some later researchers' data, but he pulls out an orbital chart, and you can see right here where he thought Planet X was, this black dot inside the green circle. Okay, he shows this to Sitchin, and Sitchin shows him his, and they confer over this, and the only difference they had was where Harrington thought it was going to be, based on including precession of the equinox from biblical times. Right, so he said biblical times, meaning he believed, I think, that the biblical Exodus did coincide with Nibiru's passage. Okay, so there was another kind of point there, but also notice where it is relative to Pluto. So they drew the orbits of the planets as lines here, not as spheres on a VA-243 cylinder like the Sumerians did. This is much easier, by the way, but I don't think he happenstancely picked that dot and said, "Oh, it's right here outside of Pluto." Okay. So also you can see from this chart, it's not completely clear. Up in the upper left-hand corner, you can see Pioneer 10.
Okay.
Down in the vicinity of Scorpio, you can see Voyager 1. If you look in the area of Sagittarius, you can see Voyager 2. And so you can kind of get an idea, and I have another picture to show this, that they had positioned these probes based on these inbound and outbound paths from apogee to perigee, or aphelion to perihelion when you refer to the sun. So that they could look and see if what the Sumerians said was true and what they later found in 1983. Okay, so they got together in 1990, but in 1983, a whole bunch of newspaper articles came out from the IRAS program indicating they had located Planet X. It showed up in the New York Times and the Washington Post and several other papers. Okay, and I include those links in here, and a whole bunch of other links, over 50 different links, that I'm not going to spend a lot of time on with you here, okay? But the bottom line is, if you look at this orbit here, it looks like it's a retrograde orbit, okay? And it's in the vicinity of inbound crossing at Sagittarius. Whereas Harrington said, if you take into account precession, this blue one here, that he believed he needed to focus in the constellation of Libra, Okay, so that's why you see Voyager 1 right there. Okay, it's in the constellation of Libra, and then the other inbound path right here that overlaps with Gil Broussard's work is Pioneer 11 right there. So he basically put it on the inbound and outbound path of the prediction for what he believed. Now, that's some pretty serious commitment for a conspiracy theory, don't you think?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. So that's kind of what they did. They agreed that an intruder planet like Nibiru could have caused the displacement of Neptune and Uranus, and they basically not only believed it, but they believed they had located it and put it on a map. Okay. So the question nobody really asked was, is this map to any kind of scale? And I actually went through the analysis of that based on what they said in the articles to see if it was, and if it turns out it was. Surprise, surprise, right?
Wow, that's remarkable.
Okay, this next picture in Figure 9 kind of shows. Remember, I told you in Sagittarius he put one of the Voyagers, and here you can see the Pioneer 11 up just on the other side of Scorpio. So he was looking in. So you can see the way it's oriented. This one's looking for an outbound, and this one's looking for an inbound, or vice versa, depending on the field of view of the satellites. Okay, but they are these probes. Okay, so I thought that was pretty significant. Here's a link right here to the video if anybody wants to. I have one on my site as well, but I think Marshall Masters got a copy of it.
Oh yeah, Marshall Masters, great guy.
Yeah. So there's a video of Sitchin and Harrington meeting and discussing exactly this. Okay, so I thought that was quite amazing. Well, in 1991, a year later, after Sitchin and Harrington got together and agreed that not only does Planet X Nibiru exist, but he had some estimates about where it was that showed up in these articles in 1983. Okay, and we'll get to that in just a second. But he believed it was just outside of Pluto, to give you some idea where he thought it was then.
Jeez.
Okay, so in 91, knowing this, he went to the Birch Observatory, or Black Birch Observatory in New Zealand, to take what he called an 8-inch scope. Now, whether it was something he carried or it was at the facility, I don't know. But an 8-inch scope is not very significant. And he was looking approximately 30 degrees off the horizon, off the ecliptic to the south, which is, it's close. This is part of Antarctica, right? Or the Antarctic area. It crosses over into New Zealand. So he was down there, and he believed this was a place that he'd be able to see it coming in from the south through the constellation Libra, as he showed on that map. Okay, so his actions coincide with what he said. Well, make a long story short, he went there, I believe, to get a blink reading from the previous sighting so that he could determine its exact velocity and do all the orbital and ephemeral calculations that an astronomer would do to write papers, right? That's what he was doing.
Right.
And so he had planned a conference when he came back from there to release his findings, very excited apparently, when he somehow contracted rapid throat cancer and died. So he never got to discuss what he found with his 8-inch scope in Black Birch, New Zealand. Well, this started to get pretty fishy to me, mostly in retrospect. I didn't really get it, what was going on at the time, and how there was a cover-up over what the IRIS satellite had disclosed. And part of this cover-up came from a guy named Neugebauer. He had differing data significantly than Zecharia Sitchin, and I don't know what role he was playing, but it looks like it was very contrarian. Okay, so by 1993, Dr. Harrington's dead. Tom Van Flanderen, one of his cohorts, is still working on the same kind of research and publishing papers. And then about 1993, the discussion, the articles, the disclosures from these scientists who weren't under wrap absolutely went silent. I mean, it was just deadly silent. You could tell there was some sort of cover-up going on, especially in retrospect with an unexplained death, the person sitting on the pulse of the data that was about to disclose it. It was all too suspicious. So we fast-forwarded in time and got to some of these other major claims that were showing up in the papers. We can just real quickly, briefly go through these. Detroit News, January 16th, 1981, 10th planet Pluto's orbit says yes. So Actually, Harrington came out and said in the interview with Sitchin that he believed Pluto was actually originally a moon of Neptune that had been stripped off by this intruder planet. He said this in the video.
Okay.
So yeah, very interesting. Then the next article in Figure 11, you can see this one. Clues get warm in the search for Planet X. So this stuff was out there January 30th, 1981, actually. And in the two articles that started coming out about this time, I wanted to talk about the two players. So Harrington had his opinion and his map, and a guy named Neugebauer had his opinion from the IRS data, and he was kind of a very much insider, had his fingers right on the data, is very much in control of it, as a matter of fact. He said Nibiru, at the time that they found it in 1981 in this paper, that it was 50 billion miles from the sun, and it wasn't going anywhere. It was stationary. Don't worry, it's not coming in. That's what he said. Where at the same time, Harrington said, no, it looks to me like it's 5 billion miles outside of Pluto. And Pluto is 3.67 billion miles from the sun. So we're talking about less than 9 billion miles from the sun. This constellation sits, and this coincided, by the way, with his diagram he had shown on this orbital chart that he gave to Harrington, or gave to Sitchin. Okay, so I actually looked at that, and I won't go through the math, but I actually did a linear analysis just by doing, if this is to this and this is to that, then how far is this dot from this here dot, right?
Okay.
And so we knew that 3.67 billion miles from the sun is where Pluto was, so he drew a line for that, so you could actually calculate where he put this dot. It turned out to be 6.6 billion miles away from the sun at the time that he did that. So that very, very significantly differed from what Neugebauer said. Mm-hmm. And at that point, I was like, okay, Neugebauer's still alive, but Harrington died, so something's going on here. Okay, so this is going so on and on and on with these articles coming out, and this was not new, by the way. When I get to the end of this section where I'm disclosing the news, you find out that there were this link right here will give you, I don't know, hundreds of articles that have been going on over Planet X and research since way back when. Okay. So this is absolutely not new. Okay, and some of them are back in the 50s. Okay, so the next thing I did, and I'm going to skip all this math here, was I went to a table and started making some assumptions about what these scientists told us scientifically. We were told, and I was very conservative. Okay. I was probably overly conservative, but I'll explain where I made up for it. So, number one, Neugebauer told us that the Nibiru complex found by IRS was 50 billion miles from the sun. Okay, let's just assume that was true, or that maybe that was its aphelion distance, the furthest way from the sun in its orbit. Okay, suppose that's true. Well, if we started there and knew that what the Sumerians told us was true, that it takes 1,800 years to come in, 1,800 years to go out, using distance equals rate times time, you can calculate the rate. And that's what I call the Neugebauer rate. It's not a very accurate rate, but it's an average velocity of how fast it would have to move if it was 50 billion miles away, like he said, to make it into aphelion. And that turns out to be this 27,777. Okay, it actually is a reasonable number. Well, when you get down to how fast it's going per second, it's actually quite low. So I know it's very conservative. Okay, so that being said, I had a couple of assumptions I wanted to do in these Nibiru transit tables. Number one, I said, well, if Nibiru came parallel with Pluto and it was moving at this rate, and this is an average rate, okay? It doesn't take into account the fact that something on a long elliptical orbit travels very slowly at aphelion, and very quickly at perihelion. So when it gets close to the sun, it gets a slingshot effect from gravity and everything else in the inner planets, and it travels much faster than it does when it's further out in its orbit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Okay, so that being said, suppose Nibiru came up next to Pluto and was going to come inbound at this rate, how long would it take to get next to the sun? Pretty simple question, right? And there's your 3.67 billion miles in the first column for Pluto. And I then started thinking, well, you know what I need is a scalar. That's what this third column is, that takes into account the slingshot rate of a comet when it comes into the close orbit with the sun. And I've seen numbers that go up to 20 times faster than its average velocity, depending on how close it comes to the sun, its mass and diameter, and there's a whole lot of factors to consider. All right. So that being said, if that was the case, and you started out with a scalar of 1, it wouldn't be here till 2115, and then I'll just jump down to a scalar of 4. If you did that based on where Harrington said it was, approximately 1990 or 1983 in these papers. Okay, you got to fast forward to when he met with Sitchin, which wasn't until 1990. So we're talking about 7 or 8 years difference. So it was still moving, if it was moving at all. Well, if you go to a scalar of 4, you can see from 1983 in the upper right-hand column there, and you add the number of years by dividing this velocity, you would end up with 33 years from that point in 1983, and it would land you here in 2016. Now, this isn't conjecture, okay? This is real science. That's what the numbers say. So then the next question to ask yourself is a velocity of 4 scalar based on this very conservative Neugebauer velocity, is it a good assumption? And I just told you that it could go all the way up to 20, so it's within range, okay? So that's point number 1, okay? So I started to go, wow, there's the number 33. We know how significant that is to the Masons.
Oh, yeah.
This scalar and puts us into this time frame we're going right now. I'm like, woo, this might be something here. I'm not sure. Okay, so that was the first attempt I did. The second one, I said, well, okay, let's not go parallel to Pluto. Let's just start where Sitchin's linear chart, his orbital map, says it was when you do this linear analysis. Remember, he said it was 5 billion miles outside of Pluto the first time in 81 or 83 when all the articles came out. Well, later in time, when he met with Sitchin, he showed it on this chart, and it turns out it's 6.6 billion. Well, in a way, what we have here is a blink, where we can calculate the velocity based on the known time that transpired between when we looked at it the first time and the second time. Right? So I haven't done that yet, but I realized that we have that data based on what, if you assume the dot on his chart is to scale, which I believe now it is, because this number is very close to the 8.67 billion miles outside of our sun, with the time elapsed from when he met with Sitchin. So this made sense to me. I'm like, wow, this is he's really putting it out there. This is crazy. So starting with that velocity, very, very average velocity, okay, that it was just calculated assuming that what Neugebauer told us from IRAS was the most conservative case, that it was at 50 billion miles, okay? Don't lose track of that. Now, in that case, if it was traveling at that rate, I'd have to go all the way down to a scalar factor of 7. Okay, it's still less than 20, but I'd have to go down to a velocity scalar of 7, which kind of takes away some of the conservative slack I did in coming up with this velocity in the first place. And that puts you here in 2017. So those are the two dates that fall out of here that seem to be the closest ones within our time frame that numerically could make sense. Okay? So I don't want to bore people with this, but all of a sudden I realized that the numbers are showing that based on when this gentleman, Harrington, saw this thing in 1990 or so, or 91, the last time he was looking for it, till now, it looks like it's absolutely overdue. Right? The only unknown to me is what's the velocity scalar when it comes in close orbit with the sun? Because we know it's faster, we just don't know how much faster.
And you know, Gerald, what's nice is you're actually giving us some data and some scientific reference points. So instead of making speculations about lens flare or swamp gas or, you know, the possibility of it being Nibiru, I mean, you're looking at, okay, I don't have a whole bunch of pictures to show you, but this is the scientific data, and these are the reference points. So,
yeah, you know, actually, after I wrote this report, I think the next day I thought, you know what, I ought to at least make the effort. I don't have the camera equipment or the expertise as a photographer or even an astronomer for that matter to have all that kind of equipment. I used to have a Schmidt-Cass telescope that was really terrific, and I used to play with it a lot. So I had some experience, but I knew that light artifacts can really fool the eye and the camera. But that said, I went out in the morning, shot a sunrise with just a regular camera, a digital camera, knowing that I was going to get lens flares and stuff. And then I did the same thing at sunset that day to see if I could see anything, as the solar radiation dimmed a bit, so you could see if there was anything coming into close perihelion with the sun. And we know it would be coming up underneath from the bottom in the constellation Libra, like Harrington told us. So looking at whatever was coming out of the Antarctic webcams was very significant to me. And speaking of that, I know you've had some guests on that have been looking at, aggregating the different pictures and videos from all around the world, trying to corroborate what's going on with Earth changes relative to what we're seeing in the skies. And I applaud that effort. Actually, I know a lot of people will be lambasted for it. But I don't want to see, people being taken advantage of and being tried to be made fearful of what events are coming in order to, I don't know, have economic gain. Okay, to me, I think that's just terrible.
Well, and that's a good point.
It doesn't mean
you're bringing up.
Yeah,
a good
it doesn't
point.
mean there are. Yeah, it doesn't mean there aren't some scary issues that need to be dealt with at each individual relative to some Earth event changes. But I don't think, from what I've seen, I'm not real pleased about the way it's been done. Okay, so
well, and let's talk just for a second. Let me jump in here if I can, because a lot of the comments you read on Nibiru, whether you're having just a very proper discussion, don't even bring up doom matters, just saying that there's a possibility there's a planetary body out there, you're going to get comments saying, "Oh, F off! There's nothing there. It's not good. We're not going to die. This is talked about a dozen times and whatever." So I think you're bringing up a good point. And let's say that there is a possibility of an extinction level event. Well, I mean, what can we do about it? Well, let's enjoy the time that we have. Let's spend quality time with the people we care about and take advantage of the opportunities that present themselves instead of putting ourselves in fear and thinking, we got to get an underground bunker or we're going to die or anything like that. I mean, if this is natural, if it's meant to be, it's meant to be.
Well, I actually took several pages at the end of this document to discuss, what our options were from a very esoteric level of what we are as a human being. And you'll find this out about me in my second book. I like to understand things at a very deep level. Anyway, getting back on track, speaking of pictures, I did that. And I actually published it on my website right after I did this Nibiru orbital update for another set of audience. I put together like a 15-minute, here's what I saw at sunrise, here's what I saw at sunset. Does this corroborate with what everyone else is seeing? I don't know. It's interesting. I'm learning a lot about my camera. And I learned a lot about how to do different analyses just through this process to shield some radiation without getting different artifacts. And, I'm a very skeptical person. I'm an engineer, so I generally don't accept things very readily. I'll take the data in and process it for a while, but that doesn't mean I've accepted it. So, but I think I'm really happy to see amateur astronomers looking to the skies. Heck, in the past cultures and history, the understanding of the motions of the constellations in the sky is very important knowledge for them knowing what time it was in the heavens, and also it had practical implications for them establishing their term limit rules using the zodiacal house, like we discussed last time. So that a lot of these equinox and solstice temples were built for exactly doing just this. So there was a group of people that were sky watchers, that were, liaisons to kings and demigods. Okay, and so this is kind of an important space. So to see amateurs doing it, they may not have the best equipment, but at least it's informative, and it connects you with the history of mankind and how we've understood our place in the universe. So also, speaking of that. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, thanks. I was going to bring up, there's some video footage that I was able to record from a Skycam, and the person that sent me the original link to this doesn't want me to mention which Skycam because he's afraid it's going to get shut down. And he works at hospitals where he basically helps set up the x-ray equipment and stuff like that. So he's well-trained in what to look for on photographs and pictures. And he actually got into this just looking at the Skycams, not looking for Nibiru or anything, about a year or so ago, just to have fun. He didn't even really know about it, he said, Nibiru. I mean, he'd heard about it, but it wasn't his thing. And he's been sending me a lot of pictures and footage of what he says are these heavenly bodies coming into our solar system. And he says that for sure it's without a shadow of a doubt, in his opinion, the red Kachina, whether that's Nibiru or Wormwood or whatever, but there's several other planets or moons that he thinks are coming with it, and a couple of them are blue, a couple of them are green, one of them's red. I would like to send you this footage, or this picture, and it's just a couple of minutes, and maybe you could, while we're doing this video, you could give us your expertise and say, no, that's that's
Yeah.
Pluto or
Yeah,
whatever.
for sure. Yeah, for sure. Well, I was
Great.
going to show you in this figure 14, one of the only pictures that I found that I believe was valid
Okay.
was apparently released from the South Pole telescope in the Antarctic by an insider. Okay, and I'm not going to say any more than that. I just took it with a grain of salt and said, well, maybe it's real, maybe it isn't. It looks like it. Turns out it was real. And in this figure, you can see a central sun with some red iron oxide cloud around it, whatever it is. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different satellites around it that we can perceive. There may be more. And I'm quite sure that this is a real photo based on what I know now. And it also coincides with the discussion of how many satellites went along with Nibiru and its central sun back in the Enuma Elish. There were several of them. So it looks like basically what you have is not one planet coming in. You've got a whole brown dwarf or red dwarf system coming in. And so you could have a blue one and a red one in different colors depending on the gases around the planet, and how they interact with the sun. So I won't spend too much more time on that. They did give you coordinates I gave you some coordinates in here that used to have a blacked out region in Google Sky.
I think
and
it's
then
still there, right?
Unblocked. You can see in figure 15, this is actually what you see when it's unblocked. So you can see if you zoom in that on that other picture, this is what you get. Now, I want to say something about Google Sky. First of all, these digital archive pictures that they have in their database are old. They're like 2007, I believe it is. I can't get my glasses focused enough to see what it says here. So if that's where it was in 2007, that doesn't mean that's where it is now. So Google Sky is not updated to the current images in our solar system. While I'm sharing this desktop, I've discussed this a few times. There's a really wonderful anonymous message on my website, and it's on the 7th Planet tab for my book. We're all the way at the bottom of the page. I'm not going to go over it here, but if you listen to it and read this message here that I actually included from that message in this report, you'll find out the stuff related to Nibiru is quite amazing. And whoever did this had deep insight into the history and the relationships of the Anunnaki with mankind. So I'll leave it at that. I usually don't introduce conjecture and things like that, but as a scientist, when you start finding that what you've been told is the truth and then discover that it's not, there's a lot broader spectrum of reality than what you've been told, you kind of take your filters off a little more so that you can wrestle with some of these concepts, but still try to maintain your engineering or scientific discipline to have a filter so that you don't get duped. And nobody likes to be duped, right?
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, so anyway, there's that message right there, and there's quite a bit of data in here talking about Nibiru and its atmosphere and what's going on the Earth and when we started chemspraying and all that kind of stuff. It's all in here. It's quite amazing. So I'll leave that at that, but I want to move to a little bit more about some of the other sources we have for Nibiru. For instance, the Egyptian Kolbrin Bible is quite interesting. And I highlighted some stuff in there that I'm showing right now where it talks about, it calls it the dragon or the celestial dragon that comes about. And clearly it looks like it causes quite a lot of destruction. So if Nibiru truly has a debris tail, whether it came from its Enuma Elish collision account with inner planets that it's following around, or it picks it up from the asteroid belt or the Oort cloud, who knows? It seems to have a destructive tail that probably looks like a dragon's tail when this constellation gets closer to perihelion with the sun. It would be lighting up a lot of different things. So
right,
that's possible. Anyway, so the Kolbrin Bible talks about it. It does call it Nibiru, not Marduk, like I told you before. And it mentions Tiamat and several other the correlations with the Babylonian Epic of Creation, or the Enuma Elish, okay, which by the way is on display in museums. You can go see it today. So I put that in. They had a little picture about it, and basically, the color red does get associated with Nibiru or its central sun, which probably is a brown dwarf that didn't ignite. It's the kind of one of the theories that have been bouncing around about is Nibiru lit or is it not lit or whatever. So, and also, and I know you get exposed to this a lot. One of the other sources that's pretty significant for people that are fans of an apocryphal book like Revelations in the Bible, it talks quite a bit about wormwood and the seemingly sequence of bad things that start happening to the earth once it makes its appearance. And you can read this in Revelations for yourself. So it talks about the water changing colors into blood, and the fish and the animals and the vegetation dying, and lots of other things that do seem to correspond with what happened with the biblical plague. So, during the Exodus, which is about 1587 BCE. So if that turns out to be true, then the math that I did in this orbital table corroborates that was a passage point for Nibiru, because that puts you into 2015 or 2016 if you just add 3,600 years.
Right.
Yeah, so that was pretty significant to me.
And there's a lot of speculation about this year having some serious problems. I mean, I think that there was some kind of cryptic message with the Queen's message, about this being the last Christmas possibly, and just weird stuff. But, it's probably another psyop.
I heard that. It was very out of character for her to say what she said. And I guess she said the first thing and they had to re-script it, and then she said something else. Of course, I don't know that that's true, but that's what was reported. And that kind of coincided with this strange message that the Pope released, also saying that, enjoy this Christmas, it's going to be your last one. Like, what's going on this year? There were two very short, consecutive, almost occultish releases of information from the Pope and the Queen of England that I thought were really quite odd. And, if you tie all that together with what's going on with a clear push for World War III and the potential that if Nibiru was coming in, the underground bunkers would make a lot of sense, whether it's for a nuclear assault that you caused or whether it's from an actual event from a planet coming in close parity with the sun, whatever it is, those facilities are really available for people to escape to. I bet you don't have a ticket, do you, Rex?
No, man. I'm in it for the ride. I'm gonna go down a blaze of glory, man.
Remember the movie 2012 where Woody Harrelson was in a travel trailer?
Oh yeah.
Out at was it Yellowstone? Yeah, he was out at Yellowstone looking over the caldera, I think it was. He was in his travel trailer, excited about his mission, sharing it with the people right to the very last minute. And he didn't run and hide in a hole or try to save his carcass. He knew it was an extinction level event, and he faced it in a brave way, I think.
Yes, he did.
So what we're sneaking up on is, if we do experience an extinction level event, how are you going to respond? Are you going to immediately, if you knew 6 months in advance, what would you do? If you knew 3 months, if 2 weeks, a day, you do different things based on the time you had to prepare for it, right? So it's kind of like work. The time you spend on something expands, or the work that you do will fill the time you have available to do it. So if you got a short time, you get your work done quickly, right?
Right. Yeah, that's a good point.
Excuse me. So here's in figure 19, I show a picture of what looks to be some documents that correspond with Marduk's name, the planet Nibiru, and our sun, and this concept of a long dragon or winged serpent that's flying through the sky that is coming near the sun. Well, I think that has a lot to do with the depiction of the Nibiru complex, because they knew that the beings that came to the Earth were from there. So all of a sudden you go, well, was the winged serpent Quetzalcoatl from there? He sure enough was, and I show that in my books, especially in the second one. So, okay, so the next topic I talked about was, well, what corroborating evidence? Okay, so we started out going, is Nibiru real? If so, where is it? And this is a little additional topic in that, well, if it was real, what would people be doing about it to anticipate it if they had time and the knowledge from an IRS scope in 1983? Or actually it was even earlier than that. It was 81 when they released it. So they had to do it prior to 81. It looked like it was probably in the late 70s. Well, you've got that much time to prepare for something coming in and do analysis on it and and keep people in the dark so that, if you've got the ability to go save your carcass and you don't tell anyone else, then you're going to come out the victor, right? Well, guess what? That's what happened with the Noah story. Exactly the same story. These Anunnaki knew that something was coming that was going to cause a flood. They banded together not to tell the humans, and then they took off into the sky in their aircraft to avoid the calamity, and no one else knew but the ones that got saved, right? Well, we're in the same exact situation, and I think from a Christian standpoint, they believe we're in the days of Noah, and I think this is why. Well, when you find out that Noah was another name for Atrahasis, who was the king of the city of Shrupak and Enki's son, then the whole story makes sense. Okay, so government actions right now are indicative of some prior knowledge of Nibiru. And I went through this quick analysis. You can read this on your own, but basically the bottom line is there's been some significant preparations made such that you can't tell or distinguish whether it's for a nuclear fallout shelter and a continuity of government, or it's because of some extinction level event. They're indistinguishable, and they serve the same function. So, so the idea that some war may be happening that they're causing, and then they escape to a shelter after they've been cordoning off the Earth's resources and trying to, take stronghold control of them before they pop back out of their hole and decide they're going to reestablish a new world order. But that actually truly seems to me what's going on, because you have to remember, this symbol of a phoenix means that there had to have been destruction first. So this order out of chaos is on their mind, and it has been for a very long time.
Let me jump in,
right?
too, because I'm glad you brought that up, because it seems as if everything at the top levels is done by design. This systematic destruction of Earth right now. I mean, just the way that it's being pillaged, the nuclear reactors next to fault lines, all the fracking sites, the industrial pollution, the way they're spraying the atmosphere and completely destroying the atmosphere right now. I mean, I don't know what in the world they're doing, but it just seems as if maybe these Anunnaki or whoever it is that's controlling things, if they have these long lifespans or avatars where they can come back to life multiple times and just they live for forever basically if they want to, it would make me think that maybe they know, okay, well, we've got a 20,000 year span to just pillage the crap out of this planet, and we can have these lemmings that we helped slave and turn into these, Borg bots, basically these meat sacks that we can control most of them. Well, it doesn't matter. They'll make our craft. They'll do what we want them to, and we'll feed off of poisoning them and all this stuff until it's time for us to take off, and then they'll be on their own. And then maybe they do that to other planets. I mean, look at Mars, for example. I mean, the 1995 article.
Well, yeah, I know. I think a sophisticated race like this has probably been colonizing lots of areas, not just our Earth, and they seem to have a whole boilerplate template when it comes to colonizing a place, how to set up a civilization, what attributes to give to that civilization based on what functions you need out of them. You don't want to make them, able to do, I don't know, galactic star maps and find their way back to you. You don't want to give them too much, right? So it's like this iterative disclosure of technology to serve their needs. And that's, I believe, what's been going on ever since they spawned us. And, we didn't talk about that the last show. All the evidence shows they created us 220,000 years ago. And I hope we can make a few minutes available once we do the conclusion on how to respond to a possible extinction level event to talk about what's recently been discovered about the human DNA.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so let's talk about Nibiru. Suppose the numbers I put in my table, which I think are very conservative, by the way, are true. And what Harrington, the chief administrator and researcher at the Naval Observatory, what if he was telling the truth? Well, if you do that and you go, okay, well, clearly there's something perturbing the Earth that's causing climate change. We try to blame it on humans because, we're breathing carbon dioxide out and burning fossil fuels. By the way, that's a complete lie. As a matter of fact, oil is not even produced from fossilized material. That's a lie, too. So anyway, if that's the case, and that this constellation's coming in, and historically it has caused some major floods and sometimes other damaging events like we saw in the biblical Exodus and in Revelations, if it truly does that, and beings here that are using us as primitive workers know that, what are we supposed to do? And this, this brings up the issues. This comes up in a couple of movies. In the movie 2012, where you're trying to get your ticket to get to the big barge, that's docked in the mountains in China so you don't get drowned. Right. Or, so that kind of thing. And the movie Melancholia, where it takes these different characters and puts them up against a planet that's going to come in and completely smash the Earth, and there's going to be no survivor chance at all. What are you going to do? How do you act? And this brings up our understanding of who we are and what we are and why we're here and where we're going. It really forces you to go really deep into an introspective place, and it's easy to get caught up in fear if you don't understand who you are, what you're here to do, and where you're going when you leave this place. Because if that's the case, you're gonna be caught up in fear, looking for a bunker to dig a hole in the ground and save your carcass, right? I mean, you would do that if a tree was going to fall on you. You'd get out of the way, wouldn't you?
Of course.
But this is the distinguishing thing with a possible extinction level event. It doesn't matter where you are on the surface of the planet. You may be able to get underground for a little while and avoid some calamity, but guess what? You got to survive after that. And if the surface isn't survivable from a oxygen standpoint, or maybe cyanide gas comes from the tail of this thing and sticks around for 100 years, who the hell knows? Well, if that happens, you're done. You're done, and you're gonna die in a much more slow, drawn out, probably Mad Max kind of world if you are able to even live that long, under those circumstances. So this brings up some very deep questions. So what does one do? You got two choices really, and it boils down to this: you can try to do things that are motivated by the fear of an impact event that could be an extinction level event. And there's a lot of people that are doing that. They're forming communities, trying to find a cave, cordoning it off, getting guns, and the whole thing. Okay. To me, I just could never get to that place because I don't like to operate from fear. So I decided to go the other route and give this some thought and go, well, what's really happening here? Is this like a Matrix reload for us based on a species? It seems like that's how the Anunnaki treated it the first time during Noah's flood. And then they did a new genetic modification to mess with us some more, right? So we got our functions changed a little bit. Well, what if that same thing is happening now, and that the intention is for us to be in a different functional role, avatar body, different dimension, whatever it is? We don't truly have all the answers to that. But for those who have been playing around with the idea of string theory and multi-universe and looking at the possible ways that we could have been enslaved in this holographic spectrum with limited sensors, and you're able to experience your energy apart from your body. I think that is probably one of the most significant distinguishing things you can do in this life, and to realize that you are eternal. You don't have to believe something or bow down to some authority to realize that. When you do realize that, that you'll go on as an avatar indefinitely in some other dimension, or with a body or without one, but your essence is eternal from the source of the creator of all. And once you realize that, then it kind of takes away a lot of the dogmatic constraints for you to deal with that, the reality of your temple, your body, your interface to the electromagnetic spectrum. And I think that's a very important area to be thinking about, because whatever you do in that area is permanent and it continues with you. So whatever you're doing to evolve your soul, your life essence, to take on the attributes of the creator of all, which I describe in my second book, he lays them out for you. The more of that you do, I think it's not that you're trying to escape from this lesson simulator, and sometimes the word ascension is taken that way. I'm saying if you're here and you've got a set of cards to play, why not be all you can be? It's kind of an old army saying, right? Why not get to the highest place that you can be? Because if you don't do it in this dimension, you're probably going to have to do it in the next one, because there's very much a hierarchy of ascension the elevation of human consciousness all the way back to, and other consciousness of all varieties of beings all the way back to the source. And I truly believe that. So for me, I'm staying on the surface of the planet like you. I'm going to be Woody Harrelson in a travel trailer right up to the last minute, and I'm not going to die in fear. I'm going to do my avatar mission right, no matter what it is, right up to the end. And that's a mindset I want people to have. That, you know, you can spend a lot of time going out and looking at the sky and trying to corroborate and go, is that it? Is that it? Is that it? Well, the fear of death and the anticipation of death is far worse than death itself. Because there should be no fear of death when you understand what I just told you about the essence of who and what you are.
And, you know, I've had guests on the show. For example, Jason Quitt was on the show the other day, and he is just an amazing guy, and he can remember before he was born. He claims to actually remember picking his mom and going through the tunnel and saying to his mom when he was a little kid, literally, "Hey, Mom, you glad I picked you as a mom?" And she would look at him like, "What?" And he'd be like, "Yeah." And she'd be like, "Yeah, I'm happy, of course." But she didn't really know why he was saying that. And just really remarkable. And if you think about the opportunities of really where we come from, what we are, and connecting back to source, it's incredible. It seems like the further we get away from source, it's like this polarity. And, you know, hopefully once we find out who we really are, where we certainly came from, that'll allow us as an archetype as a whole to get to the next level. And certainly I feel that these avatars are kind of fun. You know, I mean, this is exciting, but wouldn't it be even cooler to be able to travel the stars like Silver Surfer style or something?
Oh, exactly. Hey, one last thing I wanted to get in before we run out of time. I know you've got another show tonight.
Yeah.
One of the people I've been following for a long time is a geneticist. His name's William Brown, and there are lots of them in the space. But he's kind of an alternative thinker where he'll think outside the box. And I was watching a video one of my fans just sent me recently, and I've mentioned his name on radio at least 3 or 4 times, asking if there couldn't, you know, how close are we getting to looking at human DNA to see if there was an intervention event by an ancient astronaut theory like it shows up on the History Channel, you know, and in the Sumerian documents, and on and on and on. So just recently, so today I watched this one, and he believes that he has found within the quote-unquote junk DNA one of the markers that distinguishes humans from apes. And the thing is, this marker is in apes, but it's not active, but it's in humans and is active. Well, okay, so you can zero in on that and go, okay, well, when did that happen? How come we didn't have why don't we see an evolutionary jump, according to Darwin, in between, you know, the bipedal ape and monkey population in humans, even though we share a lot of the same proteins that they do in our DNA. So he actually did some analysis, and the thing that really caught my attention was that when he first went into his discipline, he was of the opinion that he wanted to understand how to design with DNA to create a new species. So he had this predisposition mindset to be able to look at DNA from that standpoint. And what he found, according to his video that I'm mentioning, is that he found a linker polymer that basically takes 2 pieces of DNA, one of which comes from this transport DNA inside of the this junk DNA that we thought was junk. Well, that's not true. 50% of it has functions that we've now identified. Okay, this is where the alien part comes in, where the clamp was, right?
Right.
And so the bottom line is he has found a way that the splice took place based on this marker in this supposedly inactive DNA that not only is being activated, but also could not occur naturally, that had to be spliced using this link polymer, which he knew how to make because that was what he was doing in his dissertation. So all of a sudden he believes he's found where the Anunnaki messed with us to distinguish us from the bipedal hominids that they genetically modified.
And you know it'll be even better when we are able to learn how to like add little strands or something, and you know give us like the opportunity to have more psychic abilities, physical abilities, you know, eat less, lift more, run faster, and then hit that gene to where they can actually give us infinite life if we choose to want to live in a physical shell here for however long we choose.
Yeah, well, I go really deep in my second book about energy and matter and longevity and all these other concepts. You know, even in the Egyptian documents and from Thoth's writings, they were going into some sort of stasis state, leaving their body, entering other bodies, rejuvenating their avatar bodies for up to 1,000 years. Well, you look at the Sumerian kings list; they were somehow rejuvenating their bodies, so they were living much longer than that. So, you know, so the idea, you know, could DNA be designed such that whatever it produces is immortal? Well, we know it's true in some of the plants in the plant kingdom, so it could be true with humans as well. If you just figured out how to produce enough telomerase in your body so your DNA never had the end caps decay, you wouldn't get old. So I think the Anunnaki knew about this. And by the way, we didn't talk about that so much, but they did have the technology to do that, and they used a couple of different methods. So the latest method they used was an alchemical method. Gee, I wonder where that came from. Thoth, the alchemist, right?
Right.
Where they discovered how to turn gold into a monoatomic substance using stibium mixed with it, and there's other chemical methods that can be done too. If you're going to use a smelting method, like in Exodus 32:20, where Moses made the Israelites drink this gold that was sprinkled on the water, right? Go back and read that again. You'll realize he was given a monoatomic gold, just like was found in Hathor's temple on Mount Serbet El Kadim, which is Mount Sinai. Okay, so Enlil was there and had his little encounter with Moses, and Aaron fashioned this bull in Exodus 32:20, and the bull symbol is very significant. We won't go into that, but what they did, they were trying to imitate what the gods were doing to prolong their life, eating these wafer-sized conical bread cakes made of a talcum-like powder as a byproduct of smelting gold with the earth element stibium. So if you do that, apparently this has not only superconductor effects in your body in terms of your electrical system and your neural activity, but it also affects the pineal gland, which we know based on Dr. Strassman's work that it could, if it was energetically triggered, it can produce dimethyltryptamine, which they believe could be the spirit molecule that puts you on a wavelength or a frequency, however it's done, such that you're on the thought channel of the Anunnaki themselves or other beings as well. So DMT is kind of trippy that way. So anybody who hasn't read DMT, The Spirit Molecule by Dr. Strassman, I recommend it.
Well, I've heard of several people that have taken that, and they say it's like they swear they met an alien or something. I mean, it was just amazing. So,
well, that's what he points out in his book. He actually got a permit from the FDA to go give, or some health clinic, whatever regulations there are in the government on this kind of stuff, a class 1 drug. He was giving them a DMT directly, and then analyzing, how close this spiritual experience was to what's been reported by mystics and so on and so forth. So it's kind of a neat book from that standpoint. But in the chakra tradition from the Hindus and in the Indian tradition, that if you get this energy in your body from your tailbone all the way to the top of your head working right, your human antenna tuned right, it activates what they call the crown chakra, which is your 7th chakra, the one on the top of your head, that coincides to the pineal gland. Now, a lot of times there's confusion about the pituitary gland. That's the one at your third eye, right in between your eyes, okay? So the pineal gland is the one we're talking about. So that's a very interesting finding as well. So, going back to this Nibiru inbound issue, I think if you can do what Thoth tells you to do, which, by the way, when you read his writings, you'll realize this is the adult version of the parables he told in the New Testament. Okay, I believe it's the same being, even though his words were taken and the persona of who he was changed, but there truly was a being who dispensed an energy frequency to the humans so that they could take this on through their ganglion of Impar, wake up their Kundalini energy, and be on the frequency that the Anunnaki were on. And I truly think that's why Enki designed us the way he did, is that at some point in the future that was going to be allowed, and he had that planned. And I think it's happening now, don't you?
I certainly wonder, and I'm glad that you've broke down all these different names and going all the way back to what could very well be, the creation of human as we know it. I mean, it's just amazing stuff. I certainly hope we can have you on the show again sometime. Maybe we can make this a regular thing, man, because every time we've got you on the Leak Project, you just bring a bounty of intel, and it's always a pleasure, Gerald. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I do too, and I know you want to talk some tech sometime, but and we'll do that as well. But I look forward to it. I know our connection may be a little iffy right now, so maybe it's a good time to say cheers, and we'll do this again soon.
Absolutely. Cheers. You have a fantastic afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us here at the Leak Project. Check out Gerald's work, GeraldClark77.com. The Seventh Planet, Mercury Rising, just a fantastic book. Then you've also got The Anunnaki of Nibiru. That one's just as good. Tons of info. Thanks again, Gerald. Be safe and have a fantastic day.
You too, brother. Talk to you soon.
Take care.